Everybody. Hi. Morning. My name is Adam Mixter. I am a developer that work at Configure. Today I'm going to talk about some new terms you're probably going to hear. Well, not necessarily new, but terms you're going to hear a lot today. So these are just like newer concepts and the terms that we use to define those concepts. Here's the list of things I'm going to talk about. I could read it to you, but I'm gonna end up reading a lot of things to you because I'm basically giving definitions and I want to make sure it really seeds in your mind. So I'm not going to insult your intelligence by reading this one to you. So enjoy. My presentation is mostly to talk about what these new terms mean and what our intention for these terms was. I'm sure there's things you could do outside of the realm of what I'm going to talk about, but for the most part, I'm going to stick to what we're intending. So the first thing I want to talk about is prop object. Anyone seen this one before? Okay, I hope so, because there's a lot of prop objects out there. So this is an object allowing for retrieval and storage of data without knowing the data's specific type. So essentially, this is our new method of making a weakly typed class in a strongly typed system. You guys probably have seen this. A lot of things extend off a prop object that you use every day. So if you haven't had a look at it, I'd highly recommend that you take a look. But yeah, so there's two ways that we actually make that storage sort of work. The first way is with a prop def. So a prop def is an object that defines a get input for a specific key and how that thing is implemented. So essentially, what that means is you can do anything with prop def that you would want to for that specific key. For example, you could just set a width and then get that information out whenever you wanted it, or you could put your password for Netflix on there on a server and then go get it and then wait for it to come back every time you put it in the one. So those are options that you have for prop defs. Basically, the sky is kind of the limit on that one. It's a really nice, handy system for any needs that you have outside of just the normal get and put. Yeah. So the next way we handle that sort of data for you is with a default implementation called prop data. This is a default put and get for keys not handled by a prop def. So let's say you want to make a black hole in CET and you want every snapper to fall into it. And you need to give every snapper a velocity vector. Guess how many velocity vectors are on snapper by itself? 0. So if you wanted to add that implementation, you could do it using prop data by handing off the velocity key to prop data and then letting it handle the holding on to that data for you so that when you go to get it, it's there. So pretty straightforward on that one. The next thing I want to talk about is core properties. This is a unified property system that we built on prop objects. It's user-facing, and there's properties come from a prop definition. Caleb is going to give a really awesome presentation on this, so I highly recommend you go check it out if you're interested in core properties. Core properties basically kind of encapsulate a lot of other property systems you might know about, like animation properties, quick properties, things like that. So Caleb is going to talk a lot more about that one. That's a lot to it, and a lot to be learned. So the next thing that's of importance is prop def syntax. Paul is giving a really awesome presentation on this one later, so I highly recommend that you check that out. But we're calling it a syntax to simplify the creation of prop defs. Essentially, that's pretty straightforward. I don't think there's much to say about that, but Paul's really going to get in depth with it in his presentation if you're interested in that sort of thing. So yeah, next is components. Components are a sub-object on a core object, and they act as a sub-snapper most of the time. So let's say you have a work surface, and you want to put a bracket on it, but you don't want that bracket to be a snapper. You want something that acts kind of like a snapper, but isn't a snapper. Component could be the answer to your problem. It'll put itself in, or you can attach it to something that's already in space, like a snapper, so it kind of works as like a snapper's little sub-snapper. And it has all kinds of functionality that you might want, so definitely check that out if you're looking at something that doesn't need to be put into space on its own, but needs a buddy to essentially handle it for you. So any questions on any of that so far? No? Okay. Next is visitors and the visitor pattern. Visitors are basically an intended behavior algorithm. It sort of has its own sort of functionality, its own default implementation, but other objects that it visits can give a new implementation instead. Get parts is a really good example in the component space for this because they use visitors to get those component parts. So if you're interested in having a specific functionality for each get parts for each of your snappers or something, a visitor could be a solution to that, or maybe each of your snappers needs to move together or something like that. A visitor is just a really great way of having an implementation for a big class of things, but then you can kind of get the more intimate details from each class that you're looking for. So that's a visitor. I have an example for a visitor. I want to talk about the component part snapper real quick. So let me do that. So here's the component parts visitor. You can see it right here. We have the visit function that each visitor will use. So when it visits a component that you pass it, it just gets the parts from that component. And then as an example, we're going to look at the data symbol component. So you can see here we have the get parts method, which has its own implementation for this particular component. So each component could have its own implementation. If you had one that was coming off of this class, you could still pass it, obviously because it's still a component, and then it would have its own implementation for get parts in that particular regard. So that's basically how that one works. Prop input settings are a really interesting class that will allow you to give a hint to the program to basically make properties from your prop defs. The best example I have for this one for you is actually on the Fika Office Ped. So if you look at the base class for the Fika Office Ped, come on. Shoot. Frick. Hold on. Sorry, I got the wrong class. So you can see we have all of our prop input settings right here for this particular class. A great example would be height. So height now has a prop input setting right here. You can read all this code for yourself, but something that's interesting to note is it has attributes of quick, stretch, and insert. So if I were to go look at the ped, or a ped, that extends off of that class at least, you can see it has quick properties for height. Oop, hello. Right here, and stretch properties right there. Super stretch also works for this ped, and all that implementation is kind of handled for you by the prop input setting. So you have to do the rest of the work, obviously, but a lot of the base work can be handled for you with the prop input setting. So core properties, right? Yeah, that's right. All the core properties can be handled that way. You don't need to. So prop input setting already has in it a place to override what property factory gets generated. Sure. So you can just take the stock prop input setting and say, I want you to use this property instead. Sure. You can extend it, but prop schemes is the scheme system that leverages against prop objects, or prop object, I should say. Prop schemes is pretty straightforward. Not going to really demonstrate that because I feel like everybody has an idea what a scheme is. But if somebody wants me to later, I'd be happy to. And then vessels. Vessels are they're a means of adding functionality to a greater whole without changing the original. So let's say your snapper needs a new method that you don't want to put on the base snapper class for some reason. You could use a vessel to sort of add a functionality to that snapper that it doesn't have temporarily, and then remove that vessel. And then you're going to hear probably a fair amount about space vessels as well. So I just wanted to talk about those real quick. They're just vessels on space. they don't really sound that exciting, but I promise there's a lot going on there, and people are using them all over the place. So I want to talk about a couple more examples I have here. I have a vessel example with the Fika Office Stretch and a 3D vessel, which is pretty interesting and kind of brings a couple concepts together here. Um, so if you'll notice on these work surfaces when I stretch them, and I'm sure everybody's seen Fika Office once or twice in their life, you get this neat little arrow and a neat little text that tells you how wide it is right there on the snapper. So that is actually handled by a vessel, which is this work surface stretch vessel. You can see it has functionality for its 3D methods that involve going and getting the dimension that it's looking at and a 3D arrow and sort of displaying that text to the user. So this is a really nice way for a user to see what direction they're snapping the vessel in. Another example is actually the 120-degree Fika Office work surface. It actually has an implementation for other directions that this one couldn't normally go in. So you can kind of see, you can see stretching and arrow going that way. So there's that. And then last thing I want to talk about is the 3D component, sorry, 3D vessel visitor. So this class represents base class for both the upper storage classes in Fika Office, so this guy here, for example, and this guy here. So if we look at this guy, so let me just grab that guy real quick. Okay. Anyway, so you can see the hung vessel here for its get 3D method gets the main and extra, and the main you can see actually returns vessels 3Ds. So essentially what you get there is you send a vessel visitor to visit all the vessels and then ask them for their 3D components, hand that back, and that's exactly what makes the 3D in the case of that shelf. So this actually, a vessel has 3D in this particular case and not so much the snapper itself. So that's an option to handle, and it kind of brings together those vessels and visitors in one handy diagram there. So, and time for questions if anybody has them. Yeah. More advanced dev training for going past these things that have been kind of coming into CEC. So is there more advanced dev training going on? Sure. It's one thing if you're internally configured and you can interface directly with the person who's writing the components, but for those of us who are outside, and it's much the same for your internal as well, you kind of learn from example, like what other people done other examples, and with some of these things, you might not be around people who have ever used those before, so it's difficult to learn about that. Yeah. So, stuff like components and vessels I've heard about, and I've seen PowerPoint presentations, but it's difficult to kind of get hands-on with it. Basically, the approach is to yell at me after why don't we have documentation for this? And I go, I'm sorry, I'm ready. Paul? We have a couple options. We do sometimes do like custom training. You'll like buy some of my time and I'll do a one-on-one training or a one-on however many training. But we're getting better at putting good content in the wiki, like actually useful content for once. And we're also going to try to set a precedent going forward for any new thing we create. We want to have better examples actually in the code. Like if you looked into, I don't want to use the devil word, but if you look at CM Sim at all,
there's like some like practice exercises to get to know how to use it and stuff. We'd like to make that be more impressive. So again, we're trying to get more educational tools out there. But if ever you don't feel like there's enough, you know, all those things. But I feel like it still doesn't replace like being in class with someone who's familiar with sure. That's why we do offer the one-on-one. Okay. Awesome. You just buy up like an hour or two more time. Hey, how do prop tests work? How do core props work? Easy. Cool. That's here. Is that here? Again would be better. You'll get more hours out of it. Fewer.
Yes.
You mentioned about the wiki there. Are you going to update the wiki document, for example, like a piece of resource? You did have some example there, and I believe last week or a couple of weeks I tried to use it. The information there is kind of very broad.
Sure.
Down to the point that's just in there. Maybe your example here could go in there and add it, say, okay, if anyone want to implement resource, can get this example.
Okay. Yeah. So are we going to update the wiki? Is the question.
But you know that, right? But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Yeah.
That's the step for us to connect up.
Yeah, exactly.
Halfway there.
Yeah.
I understand.
Because I expect you as the experts and you know everything. And since you already talk about this, why don't you just go update the wikis for us?
Sure.
Or at least point you in the wiki.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. My understanding is that we're looking at updating the wiki all the time. So definitely it's one of those things, kind of like Paul said, just yell at us. We'll be happy to update those wiki pages if it's helpful.
We don't have to yell at you.
You can yell at me. It's all right.
Why I say that is in the past 7-8 years.
Yeah.
After we came here and you guys talked about it, and the wiki is never got updated.
Sure.
And I can remember what you say now. Tomorrow I may not, or maybe months from now. Say, what did Adam talk about that?
Yeah, I gotcha. I understand. Yeah. Yeah, we'll definitely take that to heart at least, and work that out. Okay. Any more questions? Real quick. Okay. Are vessels backwards compatible with old drawings? So vessels are non-streamable, so they won't end up being saved in drawings. So you don't have to worry about them in their compatibility with old drawings, if that makes sense.
You have to force a vessel to be actually streamed with your object. It's intended to be very temporary. So on save, if you're using vessels like the way they're normally intended to be used, your drawing gets saved, your vessels get nuked. So there's no load issues at all.
It's really hard. I mean, saving a vessel in general something is not.
You probably don't want a vessel if you're trying to save it.
Yeah, if you're saving it somewhere on your snapper, you might be using it wrong.
Okay. Well, that's my time. So thanks everybody for listening to me yammer on about new stuff. So hope you guys have a nice day. Thank you.